Tonight at 10, the International Monetary Fund weighs into the financial uncertainty in the UK, criticising the government's plan and saying it's likely to increase inequality. Meanwhile, there are concerns that costs could rise, including mortgages, after the Bank of England hints a sizable interest rate rise could be coming.
I think it's hard not to draw the conclusion that all this will require a significant monetary policy response.
The Chancellor has defended the government's plan and today tried to reassure big investors and critical MPs from within his own party. Also tonight, Sir Keir Starmer sets out his plan to the Labour Party conference, including a state-owned green energy company.
Britain will get its future back. A country where aspiration is rewarded, where working people succeed, a force for good in the world, a clean energy superpower, a fairer, greener, more dynamic nation.
Two pipelines that carry gas from Russia to Europe suddenly spring a number of leaks, prompting accusations of sabotage. And right on target, how NASA managed to send a rocket crashing into an asteroid travelling at 12,000 miles an hour.
And coming up in the sport over on the BBC News channel. Can Scotland secure promotion to the Nations League top tier as they take on Ukraine? We'll have all the action for you.
Good evening. The International Monetary Fund, the world's most important financial institution, has tonight weighed into the current economic uncertainty in the UK, criticising the government's plan and saying it's likely to increase inequality. And the Bank of England has signalled that a sizable increase in interest rates could be coming to shore up the value of the pound. It all follows the government's so-called mini-budget on Friday. Mortgages are an essential cost for many of us that are susceptible to any rise in interest rates, in particular the nearly 2 million homeowners estimated to be on tracker mortgages or whose fixed rate mortgages are due to end soon. So let's look at the effect on a 25-year mortgage of £200,000. At the moment, the Bank of England interest rate is 2.25%. A mortgage repayment based on that would be around £870 a month. But if that rate goes up to 4.75% in December, as some traders fear, the monthly repayment would jump to £1,140. And by next June, if the rate is 6.25%, today's latest maximum estimate by analysts, though that does keep changing, repayment would be more than £1,300. That's a big rise at a time when energy bills and other goods are also going up. Our economics editor Faisal Islam has the latest.
In Aylesbury, David and family put an offer on a new house at the weekend, expecting the mortgage numbers to add up. But today, he had some shock.
I go online, type in Google, just cheapest rate possible, and see 5.67%. At which point I go on their calculator, work out what the lending would be, and exactly the same lending as I was asking for on Friday, which was £1,100, maybe £1,200. Had gone up to almost £1,800 or around that figure.
The much heralded stamp duty cuts from Friday overshadowed by the sharp end of an interest rate shock that's hit the UK economy like a tidal wave. The Bank of England's chief economist made clear today that by November, the Bank of England would deliver significant interest rate rises.
I think it's hard not to draw the conclusion that all this will require a significant monetary policy response. Let me leave it there.
And whatever the Bank of England does, the markets are charging the UK ever higher prices for borrowing. This is the effective interest rate paid on a 30-year loan by the government. It hits 5% today, the highest level in 2 decades. The reason these further surges in borrowing costs are so important is that they're a barometer of the financial credibility of the government, one that transfers the shock from the markets into the economy and ratchets up the cost of the government's own plans. It is a message in numbers that the markets are unconvinced the government will stick to its plan. The government will face a choice between a U-turn on its tax cuts, massive spending cuts, or further market turmoil. Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey and his team will have to take into account just how much the Chancellor will borrow in deciding how high base rates will go. Kwasi Kwarteng told bankers and MPs today he was sticking to his plan despite the market reaction. The currency was stable today, but it remains close to historic lows. This is one of the trading desks where the credibility of Britain's finances is up for question.
I've never seen a budget move the pound like this in my entire career. We're looking for a breach, unfortunately, of the pound going below parity.
Worth less than $1?
Worth less. So when you see your Starbucks for $5, it'll probably cost you £5. And when it comes to next year, we could be looking at 95 cents. The first thing is, tame inflation and all this goes away. The problem is the budget that we had on Friday last week, the only thing it will do is probably add to inflation.
Stock's going well.
All of this impacts well beyond the traders' desks and the screens.
So how's the stock looking today?
In Lincolnshire, Will Bown runs Superfoil, but this insulation business can't be cushioned from sterling slide.
As most of the products we use are kind of global products, so plastics and aluminiums, etc., they're all priced in the dollar. So any drop in the pound directly increases our cost proportionally. So over the last kind of 20-25 years that we've been running, our purchasing power for our main components is halved, making our products twice as expensive.
With such abrupt changes in interest rates and currencies, it will be difficult to insulate ordinary businesses and homeowners across the economy.
Well, Faisal's here with me. Faisal, the situation is changing so fast. So just tell us more about this statement from the IMF. How important is it and what options does the government have now?
Well, I'll just clarify what it isn't, because when you hear about the IMF and going to the IMF, people think about 1976 and bailouts and that. It's nothing to do with that. However, it is remarkable. To be generous, one might say it's a rebuke, but it is sort of verging on humiliating, actually, just to see the detail, the focus of this statement. Let me just reiterate what it says. We're closely monitoring recent economic developments in the UK and are engaged with authorities. We do not recommend large and untargeted fiscal packages at this juncture. The nature of the UK measures will likely increase inequality, and they say that November the 23rd, when the OBR is publishing a forecast, is an early opportunity for the UK government to consider ways to provide support that's more targeted and re-evaluate the tax measures, especially those that benefit high-income earners. And it's because it's so specific and targeted. Remember, the UK is one of the major shareholders and decision makers at the IMF, so for them to say that is quite extraordinary. But also what comes underneath this. The fact is it must reflect the fact that in big finance ministries around the world, our major partners are concerned for the impact of this in the United Kingdom, but also concerned that it might have spillovers into the global economy, a global recession, their economies too. That is why you get statements like this, and I haven't seen a statement like this so specifically criticising. We have just got a statement from the Treasury saying that this whole policy reflects the speed that they acted to protect households and that they're focused on growing the economy and talking about that plan on the 23rd of November. But it can't be good news that that not just the markets are sort of saying to the government to think again, but now the IMF has clearly said that the specific policy that helped catalyse this crisis, that they should re-evaluate it and quickly.
Faisal, thank you. Well, you can follow Faisal's blog as well as get more updates, news and analysis on BBC News Online. That is, of course, at bbc.co.uk/news, and you can use the BBC News app as well. Now, the United Kingdom needs a fresh start and a way out of the endless cycle of crisis caused by the Conservatives. That's the message from Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader. In a speech to the Labour conference, he was scathing in his criticism of the government's handling of the economy, especially after the mini-budget last week and the tax cut for the highest earners that we've just been hearing about. Don't forget and don't forgive was his message on that. He set out his main ideas for a Labour government with more investment in the NHS and a publicly owned renewable energy company called Great British Energy. And amid the continued uncertainty on the financial markets, Sir Keir said that Labour was the party of economic stability for households and business. Our political editor, Chris Mason, is live in Liverpool for us now. So, Chris, how are people there reacting to what we're hearing about the IMF and what's been happening in the markets?
People here, Fiona, have been looking on open-mouthed at the markets and indeed what the IMF have said this evening. People here are nervous about the consequences, but they also see the political chance of something of a breakthrough, perhaps the chance that people will look afresh at Labour. Tonight, plenty of activists have spilt out of the conference centre here into the bars. Keir Starmer has got rid of his suit, put on the casual clothes. He's been touring various do's as well, telling supporters that he thinks the political landscape might just be changing. This after a speech today where he tried to speak beyond supporters in the room here to the country at large. Supporters in silhouette. Applause and smiles, lots of smiles. Keir Starmer and his wife head for the conference hall. Labour is upbeat about its future, downcast about the present.
The government has lost control of the British economy. And for what? They've crashed the pound. And for what? Higher interest rates, higher inflation, higher borrowing. Don't forget, don't forgive. The only way to stop this is with a Labour government.
From a sharp critique of the Prime Minister to a sharp critique of Labour's recent past, Sir Keir determined to portray his party as pro-business, pro-defence and getting rid of hostility towards Jewish people.
We had to rip out anti-Semitism by its roots. We had to show our support for NATO is non-negotiable. Show we want business to prosper. Shed unworkable policy. Country first, party second.
Keir Starmer is attempting to pitch himself and his party as trustworthy custodians of the economy, so often a weak spot for Labour.
Missions don't achieve themselves. You need focus, determination, and the courage to make very difficult choices. It means not being able to do things, good Labour things, as quickly as we might like. That's what responsible government looks like.
One of the big themes of this conference has been to argue that the UK should be a world leader in renewable energy, a green growth superpower, led by a state-owned firm. Because
it is right for jobs, because it is right for growth, because it is right for energy independence from tyrants like Putin, then yes, conference, great British energy will be publicly owned.
One of the biggest cheers of the speech, an attempt to meld future economic growth to left-wing instincts. But an overriding theme was junking the era of Jeremy Corbyn, hauling the party away from the far left. Sir Keir wants to scrap business rates in England, unleash an entrepreneurial spirit, celebrate aspiration.
Labour is on your side. Labour is the party of home ownership in Britain today.
A Labour government, he said, would never allow Vladimir Putin to succeed. It would, he added, ensure the NHS no longer had its face down on the floor. But victory for this party is so much harder after the near wipeout of Labour MPs in Scotland, courtesy of the Scottish National Party.
For them, Scotland's success in the UK is met with gritted teeth, seen as a roadblock to independence, and so they stand in the way. We can't work with them. We won't work with them. No deal under any circumstances.
Notice there a firm commitment not to cook up an arrangement with the SNP. And take a look and listen to this, carefully sketching a line lifted straight from Tony Blair. Keir Starmer running away from Labour's recent past, but embracing what came before.
We are the party of the centre ground. Once again, the political wing of the British people. Say it loud and believe it. Britain will deal with the cost of living crisis. Britain will get its future back. This is my commitment to you, the national mission of the next Labour government. And together with the British people, we will do it. Thank you, conference.
After years in the doldrums, years of fighting amongst themselves, Labour and Keir Starmer are starting to believe they may be able to win. There is a confidence in the air, but they still have a massive mountain to climb.
to see that side of Keir that I've told everyone is there. He's passionate about this country and he's got the plan to make it better.
So many people will be looking at the last few days and saying, is there an alternative? And the answer, emphatically, after that speech is yes.
That was the speech of somebody who could be the Prime Minister tomorrow.
That isn't going to happen, but Labour are allowing themselves to imagine one day it might. Chris Mason, BBC News in Liverpool.
Well, one of the main political tasks for Sir Keir is to make sure his message is being well received in those former safe Labour seats which went Conservative at the last election. Our political correspondent Alex Forsyth has been to Leigh in Greater Manchester, which went from red to blue in December 2019 and which Labour needs to regain if it's to form a government.
The stall's been set out, Labour's pitch made. What matters, of course, who buys what's on offer.
Thank you, take care.
Greengrocer Paul has been in Leigh Market for 39 years, a close follower of politics who's yet to be convinced.
They've only become relevant over this short space of time because of what the Conservatives are not doing. You know, they were almost invisible, but that's politics, isn't it? When one party is in trouble, then the other one pounces.
With prices rocketing, there is worry here and political disillusionment.
You all right?
Something Eric, a butcher and fishmonger, is certainly feeling.
The Labour Party, yeah, I don't really know what they stand for at the minute. I've never voted Tory. I used to vote Labour, and now I just don't. I feel politically homeless. I don't know who to vote for.
Leigh's similar to many seats Labour needs to win back. A once thriving industrial town that's battled decline. This old textile mill is part of the Hope for Regeneration. Managed by a former Labour MP, it's home to a growing number of community groups, art ventures and businesses, including these tenants, some Labour members, others not, weighing the party's offer.
Get Britain's hope, its confidence and its future back.
It feels like this is on steady ground. In the past, public reception towards Labour policies have been, oh, it's farcical, this feels deliverable.
I did agree with him actually when he said that the whole country is in a braced position, and we are, businesses, homeowners, and that needs to stop because nobody should be worrying like they are going into this winter.
I don't care if it's left, centre, all right, as long as it's looking after those working people and giving them hope and aspiration for the future.
And do you think that Keir Starmer pitched that right today?
I think he did.
What about Keir Starmer himself? Some critics have said he isn't bold enough.
He's not the most dynamic of people. But let's be honest, do we want that? We want people who are stable. We want a government that's going to deliver on its promises. That was definitely a fighting speech there, and that's something I feel justified in joining the party over.
He meant what he said, but we just need someone to deliver.
Labour may feel their prospects are looking up. What matters, of course, is whether voters share the view. Alex Forsyth, BBC News, Leigh.
Let's talk to Chris Mason again in Liverpool. And Chris, Sir Keir Starmer's speech went down well at the conference. We could all see that. But Labour know they've got a mountain to climb if they're to win the next general election.
They really have, Himalayan in scale, and it took them a while even to get to sea level. Remember that performance from Labour at the last general election in 2019, their worst in nearly a century, their worst since 1935. But they are feeling chipper. Why? Because they think that Liz Truss is deserting the territory on which elections are won, and Keir Starmer is determined to colonise that territory. He is junking the language and the policies of Jeremy Corbyn, a man, remember, who he campaigned to try to make Prime Minister, and instead he is aping the language and outlook of Tony Blair. But even his biggest supporters here acknowledge that he is no Tony Blair. And it's also worth remembering the last time Labour won a general election, they won 41 seats in Scotland. At the last general election, they won 1 seat in Scotland. That just one of many reminders as to why that snowy summit, if you like, for Labour is still a long way off.
Chris, in Liverpool, thank you. The Labour MP, Rupert Huck, has apologised to Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng after describing him as superficially black. Her remarks at a fringe event at the Labour Party conference were criticised and she was suspended from the parliamentary party pending an investigation. The Tory party chair, Jake Berry, called her comments racist and disgusting. Royal Mail workers are to stage a further 19 strikes in the next 2 months in a deteriorating dispute over pay and conditions. The Communication Workers Union announced that the action in October and November will be a mixture of single days and rolling action. Royal Mail say the company is losing £1 million a day and needs to change. 2 pipelines that carry gas from Russia to Europe have suddenly sprung a number of leaks, sending bubbles rushing to the surface. The company responsible for one of the pipelines has called such leaks unprecedented, and it's led to accusations of sabotage. The Kremlin says that can't be ruled out. Ukraine has accused Russia, describing it as a terrorist attack. Let's get more from our diplomatic correspondent, James Landau. James.
Fiona, now Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 are huge pipelines that bring gas from Russia to Germany, more than 700 miles all the way along here under the Baltic Sea. They're the longest underwater pipelines of their kind in the world. But just look at this significant disturbance to the sea near Denmark, caused, it is thought, by leaking gas. The Danish military said this area of turbulence was more than half a mile wide, and shipping is now being kept well out of the area. Now, the gas is leaking here in the Danish island of Bornholm, near there. It's thought there are a couple of leaks in Nord Stream 1 and a third in Nord Stream 2. It is not known what has caused these leaks. They're being investigated, but many in Europe are pointing the finger at Russia, including the Polish Prime Minister.
Nie znamy dzisiaj jeszcze szczegółów tego, co się stało.
We do not yet know the details of what happened, but we clearly see that this is an act of sabotage. This is an act that probably signals a new phase in the escalation of the situation in Ukraine.
And that's the point. These pipelines are at the heart of the energy battle between Vladimir Putin and the West. Russia is already restricting gas supplies, and some experts say this could be the Kremlin showing it can attack critical infrastructure. So that's the question. Is the conflict in Ukraine spreading?
It's most likely that a state actor is involved, and there are only one state actor in the Baltic that is where the possibility, the capabilities and the motivation come together, and that is obviously Russia.
Ukrainian officials are even more certain, one claiming in a tweet that explicitly this was an act of aggression, he says, by Russia against the European Union. Now, regardless of who or what is responsible, these leaks won't have an immediate impact on energy supplies to Europe. That's because neither pipe was actually pumping gas at the moment. These leaks will, though, take time to repair, and that means it's unlikely that Europe will be getting any gas from these pipes for quite a while. Fiona.
James, thank you. Well, the Russian President Vladimir Putin is likely to announce the annexation of occupied regions of Ukraine within days, according to the UK's Defence Ministry. Voting has ended in discredited referendums in 4 Ukrainian regions, partly or largely occupied by Russian forces, on whether they should join Russia. So these are the early election results, according to Russian state media. Luhansk and Donetsk in the east and Kherson and Zaporizhia in the south apparently strongly favour annexation. Ukraine and its allies say the result had already been decided by the Kremlin and will be used as an excuse for an illegal land grab. Well, let's go live now to our Russia editor, Steve Rosenberg in Moscow. So, Steve, what steps is the Kremlin likely to take now?
Well, first I want to stress the key point here, that these so-called referendums were not real referendums. They were hastily arranged, Kremlin-created, Kremlin-controlled events designed to pave the way to Russian annexation of huge swathes of Ukrainian territory. And we may well see this happen later this week. So I expect at some point this week, Russia will come out and say, right, this land is now ours, even in the absence of international recognition. So the question is, what happens then? Well, the Kremlin has made it pretty clear that if Kiev attacks and tries to get back at these territories, then Russia will view that as an attack against its territorial integrity, and it will respond with, quote, all means available to it, including potentially nuclear weapons. Now, we know that Washington has warned Moscow that if Russia uses nuclear weapons, that would have catastrophic consequences for Russia. What we don't know is whether that American warning will influence Vladimir Putin's next move.
Steve Rosenberg in Moscow, thank you. The Prince and Princess of Wales have made their first official visit to the nation since they were given their new titles. William and Catherine visited Anglesey in North Wales, where they lived for 3 years after getting married, and the city of Swansea in South Wales. Prince William's office said there are no plans for him to have an investiture on the scale of the one seen in 1969 when Prince Charles was crowned. Next year's Eurovision Song Contest will be held either in Glasgow or Liverpool after the final shortlist of cities was cut from 7 to 2. The BBC said the two remaining contenders had the strongest overall offer and a final decision would be made within weeks. The UK was chosen to host the contest after organisers decided it couldn't be staged by this year's winner, Ukraine, of course because of the ongoing war. The UK's Sam Ryder was the runner-up of this year's contest. Scotland had been promoted to the top tier in the Nations League. Steve Clarke's team only needed a draw against Ukraine in Krakow this evening. The game was goalless, meaning Scotland win the group and earn a place in League A for the next stage of the competition. Scientists at NASA have successfully tested a new technique to protect the Earth from potentially dangerous meteorites. They deliberately crashed a rocket into an asteroid which was travelling at a speed of about 12,000 miles an hour, some 7 million miles from Earth. The aim? To try to push it off course. Our science editor, Rebecca Morell, has the story.
Closing in on the target. Images beamed back from 7 million miles away as a NASA spacecraft approaches an asteroid. The details of the rocky world are revealed. But this probe isn't here to study it. Its job is to knock the space rock off course by smashing into it.
Oh, wow.
And this was the reaction from Mission Control.
Woo! Fantastic. Oh, fantastic.
I definitely think that, as far as we can tell, our first planetary defense test was a success, and I think we can clap to that, everyone. I think the Earthlings should sleep better. Definitely I will. Yeah. And how do you feel? Like the people working here, we're definitely going to sleep better.
The target was a twin asteroid system. A larger space rock orbited by a smaller one called Dimorphos, about 150 metres, that's 500 feet across. The crash gave Dimorphos a kick to change its speed and alter its orbit. Telescopes on Earth tracked the moving asteroid, capturing the moment of impact, revealing the rocky debris being hurled into space. To divert an asteroid, you need to know where it is. The biggest ones, more than 1 kilometre, about half a mile across, could cause global devastation, like the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs. We've spotted most of these and none are heading for Earth. But even the small ones pose some risk. A 20-metre wide space rock, about 65 feet, exploded over Russia in 2013, injuring hundreds, but very few around this size are being tracked. But it's the ones in between that are causing concern. A 150-metre wide space rock, about 500 feet, could obliterate a whole city, and we've only located 40% of these. Astronomers work out these numbers by carrying out very detailed observations of small patches of space, finding every asteroid that's there. Then they use computer models to extrapolate this across the whole sky to calculate the asteroid population overall.
You can't do anything about the asteroids if you don't know where they are. And so this is where DART comes in. It's something that you would want to have this knowledge of where the asteroids were and then be able to just move them slightly as needed so that they didn't hit the Earth.
It will take some weeks to see if this space collision has worked and whether we now have the technology that could one day save our planet. Rebecca Morell, BBC News.
Back to Earth. Let's have a look at the weather. Louise Lear is here. Hi, Louise.
Hi there, Fiona. I suspect whether we like it or not, we're going to be talking about Hurricane Ian over the next few days. This has the potential to be the strongest hurricane to make landfall across the Florida coastline since Irma in 2017. Now, it's cleared away from the Cuban coastline, and actually, as it moved across the warmer waters, look at that, another defined eye starting to develop. This could be at least a Category 3, if not Category 4 storm storm when it makes landfall across that West Florida coastline, potentially just south of Tampa. Now, it's in very low-lying areas, these kind of towns and cities only around a metre above sea level, and we're talking about storm surge at least 3 to 3.5 metres. That has the potential for some catastrophic damage. It's also going to produce 500 to 600 millimetres of rain, which pales our rain into insignificance, really, doesn't it? But we have seen some sharp showers today across the north and east, and this rain down to the southwest, well, that's going to slide away over the next few hours. We keep the showers going perhaps out to the coast through the night. Inland, we'll have clearer skies, a touch on the chilly side first thing tomorrow morning, but hopefully fewer showers around and the wind's not quite as strong as we go into tomorrow. This little fella here, however, could bring a real rash of sharp showers by the end of the afternoon. So we start off with a few showers across Aberdeenshire, and with that northerly wind, although a little bit lighter, a few showers running down through Wales and southwest England. But then through Edinburgh down towards Newcastle, some of the showers could be heavy and thundery. Temperatures still a little disappointing. We're looking at around 12 to 16 degrees the high. Those showers will gradually drift their way south as we go through the night, Wednesday into Thursday. They will clear away. Ridge of high pressure builds actually on Thursday, but make the most of it because we are looking at some very wet and windy weather by Friday, and that could linger on Saturday. Fiona.
Something to look forward to. Louise, thank you. That is the BBC News at 10. There's more analysis of the day's main stories on Newsnight with Kirsty Walk, which is just getting underway on BBC Two. There she is. And the news continues here on BBC One. It's time to join our colleagues across the nations and regions for the news where you are. From the 10 team, good night.